Okay, so we're going to be doing two colors. We're going to be doing a light gray for the back, and then we're going to be doing white, a bright white for the walls. So we're going to be using Spectralock 1 for the gray. I really like this stuff. I think this is really easy to use. And not only that, but I'm going to be doing the shower floor as well. So I can go ahead and do my wall first, then get my epoxy up, and then before the end of the day, just do the floor before I leave. That's one nice thing about premixes. You know, I can just use what I need, put the lid back on, and then I can use it tomorrow or whenever I need it. Whereas the regular epoxy, once you mix it, that's it. I recommend these Troxel Grout floats. This is made for urethane. They're fairly soft. First thing you want to do is just wipe down the surface with a damp sponge. You don't want to see water running down the tile or anything. You just want it to just put a little bit of water on there so it's easier to glide that grout. Now this is going to be really easy because it's just plank tile. There really isn't much to it. Leave the top area up against the ceiling free of grout because we're going to be caulking that with a latex caulking. Just to say a siliconized latex caulking. We're going to paint it the same color as the ceiling. And then also leave it out of the corners because any movement joint you need to use silicone, so we're going to be caulking that later. So like I said, really easy to use. Just pack the joints and basically you're going to be removing the excess grout in about 5 minutes. So on a wall like this, you should be able to just grout the whole wall and then clean it off. But if you're slow to start or you're just taking your time, just don't get ahead of yourself. Just know that you're going to have to wipe it off in about 5 minutes. I should mention one of the favorite grout or sponges is Ardex. Nice square edges, and it really does make a difference having a good sponge. So then all you have to do, you want to have a really damp sponge. You do not want, no, I shouldn't say really damp. You don't want to have too much water on this sponge. This is just, just a really lightly damp sponge. Because water, if you get too much water on this, it'll just run out the joint. Not a big deal if it happens, because then you just have to fill it in if it runs out. But if you have too much water on your sponge, then they're all going to run out, and then you're going to have to wait and then reapply. So this is like the initial wash, and in about an hour and a half or so, you can go ahead, and I use some Windex with vinegar on it. And I just scrub over top of it. But you're gonna wanna wait a couple hours before you do that. But don't play around with it too much with your sponge. Go over it once, really, and that's it. And if you see a low spot, you can just fill it in and just slightly wipe it off. But if you keep playing with it, you're gonna end up wiping out those joints. Okay, so then we'll let that dry for a little bit, and then we're gonna go ahead and do the epoxy next. Okay, so we're gonna be doing the walls on the sides white, and as mentioned before, Spectralock, the original formula of epoxy, is my favorite go-to for many different reasons. But we're just gonna go over mixing this real quick. So you got basically three parts, two A and B, and then C is the powder. Now they do make other quantities of this. You could get basically half the amount of this in quart sizes. So if you're, you know, I would probably recommend that for your first time. Maybe get 2 batches, get 2 of the quart sizes so that you can just do one wall, you know, do that correctly and then move on to the next. But I'm going to do both walls at the same time. Obviously, I've been doing a lot of it. But if it's your first time, I would recommend getting a smaller batch and just doing one wall and then moving on to the other. So first thing is just to get everything out of the package. And this is really important to get every bit of this part A and B out of these packages. It's amazing how one little teaspoon can make a difference with the thickness of the grout. And this is basically what's going to make it as fluid as possible. So make sure you squeeze like a toothpaste. Just get every little bit of this out of here so that you can be sure that you get a nice mixture of the grout. Definitely wear some gloves as well. This stuff I don't think you really want to have on your skin. Mixer and mix this stuff. So just mix that for a few seconds and then just use all of the powder. Okay, so first step, take a damp sponge, wipe down the first initial area that you're gonna apply the grout. This kind of helps glide this grout onto the surface. And then it's a matter of packing these joints. So this is going to be really the toughest part of this entire process. And I wouldn't really consider that really that difficult, but it, you know, it does take a little bit of elbow grease to get that in, because it's kind of a sticky consistency. You know, and then with all this subway tile, there is quite a bit of joints here, so. Okay, so then once you get so far, just kind of clean off the tiles, but you really want to just pay attention to these joints, make sure that they still stay full. It's not so much worrisome about getting all of it off of there. I'm more concerned by keeping these grout joints packed so that when I go to remove it with the sponge, you can tool it and make it nice and even with the tile. If you don't have enough grout in these joints, there's not much you can do. So just make sure that they're full. That's the most important thing. The excess off of this, not a big deal. So don't be stressed about how much grout is still staying on the tile. I mean, within reason. You don't want to have a big, huge glob anywhere, but you know, the main focus is just making sure that all these joints are packed flush with the top of the tile. So then anywhere you start again, just wipe down with that damp cloth. Hey guys, I'm grouting the shower with some epoxy white grout, my favorite type of white grout. Stay tuned. In about a half an hour, I'm going to clean this up live, and I'm going to give you a bunch of tips on how to do this. It is really easy, and I don't want you to be afraid of using epoxy grout. So stay tuned. Okay, so when you finish that, putting it in, just make a big ball out of this because then you can use this, because all of that's not going to dry all at once. So by the time you clean things, you'll be able to use some of this to touch up any areas that might have washed out, or whether you have an air bubble. So make sure that you leave it in a nice big ball so you can be able to grab some of that, because you're going to have to get, if you have to do it tomorrow, you have to get a whole new batch to even touch it up. So your best to hold on and make sure you get every little piece done. All right, we're live. Okay, so if you ever had trouble with white grout, I highly recommend using epoxy grout. This is Laticrete Spectralock. I already embedded this into all of the tile, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to clean it, and that you don't have to be afraid of epoxy grout. So the first thing is it's about timing. So you install it, you at least got 20 minutes after you install it to be able to remove it. And then what you want to do is just take your dry finger and touch the joint. And if you're pulling any of the grout out of the joint, then just wait a few more minutes, wait another 5-10 minutes. But if you can mold it with your finger and you're not pulling anything out, then you're good. So two things you need is definitely want to get 2 clean buckets of water. I highly recommend these Ardex sponges. I think they're great. I mean, the square edges make it real easy to tool the joints, because that's basically what you're doing with a sponge when you're wiping off the grout. You're tooling it and make it even with the tile. And then you want to get some white scrubby pads. This is going to be important to be able to remove this epoxy. And there's a couple of things about this grout. It's much different than your traditional grouts. And that's why I actually think it, in some fashion, it's easier than other grouts. And that is using a lot of water to remove it. All other grouts, you have too much water on your sponge, you have too much on anything, it just wants to run out the joints and remove it. But not with epoxy. It's actually really easy. And I would even say that if you have some kind of delicate tile, or not delicate, but a rough tile or something that has a lot of grooves in it, I feel more comfortable removing epoxy from it than I do the urethanes and the other premixes. Now obviously, if you got real intricate tile that have tiny little grooves in it, no matter what you do, it's going to be difficult to get that out of it, and you might want to go with like an unsanded grout altogether. But the problem with traditional grouts is that you have to maintain them, you have to seal them, you have to keep adding sealer to it. And I know that most of the clients that hire me, they don't do any maintenance. They don't do it any later on. So in my mind, there's no reason to go with grout that isn't stain resistant and doesn't need any type of maintenance. And there's a couple things about it that I think make this a good product, and that is the smoothness of the joint, so that soap, scum, and all that stuff doesn't get into that grit. There's a lot of great premixes that are white, but they're gritty. They're gritty as hell. So the soap and scum and everything just gets on it anyways, and you have to clean it. But this stuff comes out pretty smooth. So enough talking, let's get to it here. So just take a damp sponge, and you can see how much water I actually have on this. And I'm not afraid to put as much water as I want to on this, because it's not going to run out the joints if you waited the time period that you need to wait. This was about literally a half an hour. So that's quite a bit of time. You have plenty of time to pack it. And I would say that the hardest part about this procedure is actually just packing the joints with the grout, because it is a sticky consistency. It's a little thick, and you'll definitely feel it in your elbows and your forearms from packing all of this, especially subway tile. I know everyone, not everyone, but I know a lot of people love subway tile, and I've done thousands of square feet of it, and where it's always painful is the grouting process, because it's just as important as setting it. Because if you do a bad grout job on subway tile, you could just ruin the whole look of it. But I do find subway tile to be very easy to use or easy to install, but there's a lot of things that you have to be careful with when installing it. And I'd say the major thing is making sure that you have a nice flat wall before you start tiling, because if you have any divot in your backer board or anything, the tile just likes to go right with that, and then you're just kind of stressing out when you're tiling, trying to prevent lippage and whatnot. So I always recommend at the beginning of the job, you know, when you're doing the front framing, you're putting the backer board on, take your time doing that. Make it flat as hell so that you can have fun doing tile. Tile is not fun when there's divots and things that you have to keep building thin set up, and you know, it ends up becoming a very frustrating process because you're constantly trying to overcome, you know, the backer board not being straight. So just do the initial wash, and then just take a sponge and go like at a 45-degree angle and just wipe it off. And then what I'm going to do is just really pay attention to my grout joints and making sure that they look nice and flush with the tile.
What do you think the best cleaning agent is to clean the grout in your shower?
They do have a lot of those deep cleaners. Aqua Mix makes some really good deep cleaners. They call this stuff epoxy grout haze remover now. This is made by Fila. It used to be PS 87, I think it was called. But it's a great deep cleaning type of product. So you want to go with something that is pH neutral. I don't really understand why, but that's always what I've been told from, you know, the distributors and stuff. And I think it's just, you know, how it affects the grout. But that Fila PS 87, I mean, that's, you know, that really suds up and really gets it clean. But you know, it's one of those things is that if you're on like a traditional grout or something like that, you may never be able to get it back to white. You may never be able to get it back to that nice look. And that's some of the things I was disappointed with some of these premixes, is that you know, they would get dirty even at the end of my, you know, I'd be rehabbing full houses, and then I would go to try to clean the grout joints after all that construction dirt, and I couldn't get it back to clean. So you know, I really kind of kitchen floors I use epoxy. Kitchen backsplashes I use epoxy. So, you know, I mean, the one product that they did come out with, that Laticrete did come out with, is the Spectralock 1, which is a premix. That's what I did this gray grout on. And I've been really happy with it so far. So that's it there. And the next trick is just take a microfiber cloth and wipe this down. This is really important because this simple little step will keep that haze from spotting on the tile. So just take a microfiber cloth and go right over it. Because otherwise, yeah, you'll see a whole bunch of like watermarks, especially when you look up at the light. But this really helps that. And then if you see any of those marks later on, you know, in about an hour or two, that's when you can go ahead and windex with vinegar. Okay, so about an hour or two later, I would say pretty much 2 hours later, use some windex with vinegar, and then just go over all the areas with the epoxy that you did. This will just ensure that any of that haze on there is off. You can take your scrubby pad again and just scrub it.